Okay, guys, most media buyers or ad runners online live or die by one metric, which is ROAS. And I get it because it's super simple, it's easy to use. But if you're not running your measurement alongside two other things, alongside with ROAS, then your brand could be losing money. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay, what's up, guys? If you've been around paid media or online ads for any period of time, you know that people basically live or die by ROAS. It's like the first or main metric that you're showing to a client. It's the number one thing that you see in your ads manager dashboard. And whenever a client has a question, it's basically some extension of how do I increase my ROAS? But I'm here to tell you that ROAS is a little bit overrated, and you need to measure your performance alongside two other metrics in order to know for sure if you're actually succeeding with your ads. So aside from ROAS, there's two other things you need to focus on. One is called MER or MER, and that's an acronym for Marketing Efficiency Ratio. And then number two is a ratio is called your customer acquisition cost versus your customer lifetime value ratio. And if you stick around to the end of this video, you'll know for sure whether or not you're going to be running ads at a profit or at a loss if you can understand these two things. Okay, so first let's talk about ROAS and why it's helpful but really overrated. So the way ROAS works in Google ads, Facebook ads, Pinterest ads, TikTok, whatever it is, it's very much a literal metric. So a customer or a user, they're going to click your ads, which means they're getting cookied or tagged by the Facebook identifier, the Google identifier. And then they go to your website, they make a purchase, and then what's happening is you're taking that purchase value and dividing it by your spend. So it's a very literal metric, but it's a very incomplete metric, and it has a whole lot of blind spots that you don't want to ignore. And here's a few different ways that you can actually manipulate your ROAS if you wanted to, but you're not actually going to see any kind of growth in your business. So say, for instance, you're running ads for a brand and they have their own brand terms, and you can bid on those in Google. You want to run a brand search campaign. Well, you can actually overspend on that brand search campaign and buy your own keywords, and you're going to have an amazing ROAS. You might have a 20x or 30x return, and you can present that to a client, but a lot of those clicks or purchasers are going to come from people who would have converted on the organic listing anyway. So you're not actually driving real business growth there. Now, there's definitely a time and place for brand campaigns, and I would recommend those to clients, but you don't want to overspend on those campaigns and report it as real customer revenue growth. Another thing that you can do, which is a little similar, is overspend on remarketing campaigns. So you're taking maybe your existing customers or people who have been to your website but didn't purchase, and you overspend on those audience segments, and you're seeing a really high ROAS, but you're not actually able to determine if your top of funnel marketing is working at all. And here's another thing that you could do. You could also run a lot of promotions and sales for your brands. And that's going to end up causing you some damage because, or not necessarily damage, but what will happen is you'll see a really high ROAS, but the ads manager, Google, Facebook, they're not taking into account the fact that you're getting a lower margin because of the sale or promo that you're running. So if you think of your ROAS almost kind of like a speedometer, it's telling you if you're going really fast in one direction, but you're not necessarily knowing for sure if you're going in the right direction. And that's the way you want to think about it. Okay, so the next thing that you want to focus on outside of ROAS, which ROAS is important, but you want to view it alongside this metric, And this next thing is called MER, or your marketing efficiency ratio. And what this is just your total gross revenue divided by your ad spend. And there's a couple reasons why I really like this metric a lot. So first off, you're not dealing with anything pixel related. You're not dealing with anything attribution or tracking related. All you're looking at a high level is, for what I'm spending, is my business actually growing? Yes or no? So you could be running Google, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest. You could be paying influencers. Whatever it is, you're just looking at the total cost of your marketing efforts relative to your gross revenue and seeing, is my business growing or not? And this is something that's really helpful, especially when you start running multiple ad platforms at one time. Because what will happen is, say a customer will come in through a Facebook ad and then they come back later and click a Google ad. Well, both ad platforms are going to want to take attribution credit for that one customer. And you start to run into a lot of issues with marketing overlap and attribution mismatch, things like that. So what MER really does in that instance is just cut through all the noise and see if you're growing as you're spending. So here's my personal rule for using MER. In a lot of the brands that I've worked with, I like to keep your MER, or marketing efficiency ratio, at a 5. And what that means is, say you did $100,000 in revenue that month and you spent $20,000. So you take that $100,000 divided by 20, that equals 5. And that lets you know that you're in a good and healthy range for marketing efficiency ratio. Ideally, you want to be at a 5 or more, but if you start going below that 5, then you end up running the risk of cutting into your margins. It's going to depend a lot on what brand you are and what your margins look like. But anything below a 5 means you're really in an aggressive growth mode and you want to watch it really closely. So ideally shoot for 5 or higher, which means if you have $100,000 in revenue, then the max you want to be spending is $20,000 when it comes to marketing, because you still need to factor in your margins, your operations, everything like that. So what you're pretty much doing when you set a guardrail with your MER, say for instance, you don't want it to go below a 4 or a 5, all you're really saying is, we're not allowing spend or anything in terms of our marketing budget. We're not pushing that harder than our revenue can actually keep up with. So if ROAS is like your speedometer, then MER is kind of like a GPS that is keeping you in the right direction for your business growth. Okay, time for the next metric, and this is actually my favorite one to use. And in my personal opinion, it's probably the most underutilized one in the entire media buying industry. And this is called your new customer acquisition cost to customer lifetime value ratio. And this is something where you're playing the long game, so to speak, but it's really the main winning game that you want to be focused on. So here's the main insight. Your return on ad spend, your ROAS, and your marketing efficiency ratio, those two things both measure your what is called a front end performance. But they don't really give you any real insight into how your business is going to grow 6 months from now or 12 months from now because of your ad efforts today. So what this metric does is it looks at your cost to bring a new customer in, but it's also going to measure how much money is that new customer going to spend with you across 3 months from now, or a year from now, 3 years from now even. And you want to measure that cost versus your long-term profit to see if you're actually going to grow or not. So think about it this way. Say you have a customer acquisition cost of $50, and say that customer only spends $60 with your business, then you only get $10 in profit because of that. Now, let's say you bring in a different customer for $50, but that same customer goes on and spends $300 with you. over the course of a year. So you're profiting $250. Now, if you look at only your front end performance, your ROAS is going to show the exact same way for both those customers. And that's one of the reasons why it's a really big blind spot to get trapped in. So, in other words, your new customer acquisition cost to customer lifetime value is basically asking the question of, am I buying customers that are actually worth buying? So, really, the biggest key when it comes to thinking about this is yes, you want to have high ROAS, you want to bring in new customers as efficiently as you can, but you want to make sure that you're employing strategies to have that customer spend more with you over time. And that's how you, quote, increase your return on ad spend, but on the back end and thinking about it 6 months later or 12 months later. So if you think of your ROAS as your speedometer, you can think of your marketing efficiency ratio as your GPS, like, am I going in the right direction or not? But your NCAC to LTV ratio is more like your odometer in the car and knowing, is my car still going to be running 2 years from now or not? And so when you combine all these different things together, you cancel out all of the blind spots that each measurement tool has. And you want to be using these together as a group to actually see if you're growing your brand or not. So bottom line, each one of these things has their own strengths and weaknesses, but you want to use them all together so that way you can be more effective with your marketing, because none of them really tell the full story on their own. So use all three, build them into a dashboard, whatever it is. Look at MER, you want to make sure that's staying efficient. Look at your long-term business growth, and then you also want to incorporate your ROAS. So stack them on top of each other to make sure that you're not only just running good ads, but you're building a real profitable business over time. Okay, guys, so if this helped you think about online business or paid media differently, drop a like and subscribe below. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I read every single one of them. I'll get back to you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.